I call this meeting to order.
17 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 17 du Comité
Welcome to
permanent.
meeting number 17 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities at the House of Commons.
By the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, and on Thursday, December 11th, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of the changing landscape of truck drivers in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and our members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. The clerk and I will manage speaking order as best we can and appreciate your patience and your understanding in this regard. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter bienvenue à nos témoins.
I welcome our witnesses. Speaking before us as individuals, Ms. Claudia Boucher, welcome, Ms. Nathalie Poulin, accounting technician, and Ms. Mélanie Séguin, an entrepreneur.
We'll now proceed with our opening statements. Merci d'avoir pris le temps d'être avec nous aujourd'hui.
Thank you for taking time to join us today. We will now hear your opening statements. Ms. Boucher, you have the floor for a statement of 5 minutes. You have the floor, madam. Hello, I'm Claudia Boucher. I'm here as a surviving victim of an accident with a heavy truck that occurred in September 2025. So I will speak based on the impression that none of you know my story, so I'll tell you what it is. I'm the mother of 3 children. I'm in an active period of my life where I was intending to return to work full-time the week after the accident, still on maternity leave when the accident occurred. I was on a country road between Laurier Station and Sainte-Croix, which is in the county of Lot-Binière, near Lévis, near Quebec. And I'd stopped behind a school bus, so it's quite a busy road. It was a nice day, 25 degrees. I was listening to the radio, so I stopped that first time, you see, and a young person got on the bus. I stopped the second time. A young person came across the road and also got into the bus. At the third or fourth stop, again, I immobilized my vehicle, and my vehicle suddenly exploded. I was completely shocked. I was hit from behind, and then I hit the school bus. I completely crossed the road and was immobilized there. I was able to open my door and get out of the vehicle. I fell to the grass there, turning. I could see it was a 53 Safex company truck that had run into me from behind, and that I had, of course, hit the school bus. At that point, I was in a state of shock. There was glass all over the place. It wasn't really clear to me exactly what had just happened. Someone came to help us. The truck driver came to see me as well. He had his phone in his hands and asked me if I wanted water. He passed me a water bottle. And then the person who would come to help me asked why he hadn't seen us, given that the bus had stopped, the flashers were on, the stop panel was open, and there was also that young person crossing to get in the bus. And to not be hit by the bus, which was also pushed forward when I rear-ended it, that young person jumped out of the way. And my child was not there because they were still in the house. So I had my child who had just started kindergarten the day earlier, and my other children had taken the bus to go to school that morning as well. So I asked him why he hadn't seen us in English. I think he hadn't understood the question put in French by the person who had come to help me, and he had answered that he didn't speak French. Then he left. And I said, look, impossible that he didn't see us. Clearly he was on his phone, he was texting. And anyway, he went back to his truck. And then the emergency services came and took over the situation. The ambulance transported me to the Levy hospital. There were wounded people in the bus as well. But what would have happened had I not been there to take the first shock? So today we see it could have been even more serious, half a dozen or even a dozen youth killed before we take action. I don't think that makes sense. So I went home that evening to find my children there who were asking what had happened, why I hadn't gone to get them. A big stressor for our family, and we can still feel the effects of that today. So I was diagnosed with a cervical strain and then more cervical issues, severe. I have back pain, cervical pain. I have hernias that have been diagnosed now, and post-traumatic stress as well related to this event. So, that's a lot of things. I'm not here to complain that I survived, but I'm here to explain that it could have been even worse. The youth in that bus have written me. I've got parents who've told me that they're very thankful that I was there that day. I learned that the truck driver had been found guilty of violations for not having stopped, given the fact that the school bus had its signals out, and for having followed me too closely. In any case, the truck came in at great speed, hadn't looked. There's no criminal investigation underway. This hasn't gone to criminal court. Why? There was a dash cam in the truck. That hasn't been seized. Why not? So I've got the SAQ, which is not exactly up to speed on what a TCCN is. I have been off work since this occurred, and I'm being followed up, of course, by many specialists, physiology, a counselor as well. I'm seeing these people on a daily basis. So the truck is probably being driven now by the same driver, as far as I know. He may never know what the follow-up is, and he's still working on this low-cost driver model. That company is. People know about it. We hear about this on the radio, and we don't feel safe on our roads any longer. Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Ms. Poulin, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm Nathalie Poulin, and I am appearing you today following the death of my daughter. I'm really sorry. I wasn't supposed to break down like this. Take your time, Ms. Poulin. We're in no rush. You have all the time you need. December 18th, 2024. A truck driver left from the port of Montreal with a container and took Highway 73, leaving the highway, ignoring 14 different signs that told him that he could not take that exit. The first signs indicated that this was the last possible exit before Valley Junction because based on the weight of the truck and where he was coming from, he wasn't allowed to take Valley Junction. Another sign, several more, that informed him that the maximum tonnage was 10 tons to be allowed to take that exit. To demonstrate the truck and the empty container weigh nearly 15 tons. So it's impossible that if you were loaded, you would not be over 15 tons. He should have performed a brake test, which he didn't. Several other signs indicated the grade of the incline. He didn't take that into account either. I imagine he had no idea what they were. And the last sign that could have saved my daughter's life indicated a safety bed for emergency stops to the right. As you're going down the incline, you didn't even try to use it. He probably didn't even know what the sign meant. I don't drive a truck and have no training, yet When I see these signs, they're not written in French or English. They are drawings, and I understand them. So how is it that someone didn't understand them? So he came down the incline much too quickly. At the bottom, there is a stop sign. There is a light. He tried to turn. He was incapable of turning. My daughter was coming. The light was green. That's all she saw. The truck turned over, and she was crushed. This happened at 12:30. They managed to get her out of the vehicle to send her to the morgue at 4:30 in the afternoon. How did we learn this? Because she had her cell phone with her. And when the accident occurred, we learned of it. You know, in cell phones, we now all enter emergency contacts. If you have an accident, when the cell phone suffers a significant impact, these people receive a text. Emergency services are called. And people also get her location, and emergency services do as well. When they left with Alexandra to take her to the morgue, we were able to see that last trip because her cell phone went with her. So the first thing that we learned was that there had been this shock, this impact registered by the cell phone. We didn't know much more. We weren't too concerned. We never thought it might be an accident. And it was her partner waiting for her at home who headed out to the scene of the accident to see what was going on. And that's when we learned what was up. I learned much later over the phone because now police officers don't go to the home. It's 811 people who it seems are trained to share this information but that haven't time to travel to see us. So a charming lady over the phone told me that my daughter was dead. Then the questions begin. Why? Who? How? What happened? How could this possibly have happened? Through this, we've come upon shocking truths. I never imagined that I should have fought for my family's safety to ensure that everyone understands that we're not safe. How is it that companies that don't comply with road safety rules are allowed on our roads? Why are we tolerating that today in 2026? This is unacceptable. How can one drive a heavy-duty truck without being trained to do so? You'll say, sure, now there's training that's required, but in 2020, at the federal level, you asked for minimal training. In Quebec, we were the first in 2023, but it didn't get applied until 2025. How many people now have permits but weren't trained? The person who killed my daughter, who hit my daughter, he didn't get his driver's license just the week before. He'd been driving trucks for a couple of years already, and he's still driving trucks because given that the investigation isn't finished, the police officers aren't in their right to remove his driver's license. So when you leave today to drive home, look at the trucks around you. He may be a driver. Imagine what we think out on the road when we look at trucks. We just don't know. It could be him. This is really unacceptable. And then we had requests for a response from the Department of Transport. Something had to be done. The signage had to be changed. It's a very dangerous hill. They even moved a building, a commercial building, at the bottom of the hill because it had been run into by a truck coming down that hill in the past. Still, no news. We didn't hear any news. And a year later, they finally put up 2 cameras. So far, that's what there is. They had called us. They had promised a number of things that should have been installed in 2025, but now, so far, nothing has been installed. I don't want to look like a complainer, you know. I'm not here to whine. You know, In life, and those who know me really know this is the case, that I believe that in life we have a choice to stay home and complain or to get involved in the hope of making a difference. That's what we're doing here today. Had it been just to complain, well, I wouldn't have come here. There are no words to express the pain of losing a child. The proof is that there are none in the dictionary. There aren't any. Since the accident, we keep busy to try to make sense of what's happened. And that's why we are here today, because the worst of it since the accident is that no one wants to hear us. No one wants to hear what we have to say. We have made calls. We've called MPs, federal, provincial. No one wants to touch this. It's like radioactive. If anyone could explain why, I would really love to hear the reason. Is it because you're going to lose votes? What's up? How can people get driver's permits purchased in Ontario, given that transportation is a federal jurisdiction? It is you who set out the legislation, the rules. We had to fight to get here today. Could anyone explain why that's the case? You should have called us asking, what can we do? How can we help you? No, we had to push our way forward, knock on doors, push through doors, fight to be heard. Look, no one is ever going to call me mom. This was my only daughter. Today, there are people who are responsible for this, who go home, who see their children, and to go on with their lives. What are we doing? We're not living. We're merely surviving. That's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing since the accident. We're in survival mode. But I have hope, some hope, that this hasn't happened for nothing, and that today we will be able to act to protect our families and our children. This is your duty. That's why we have elected you. Today, this is a reminder that the road can kill, that negligence has irreversible consequences, and a reminder that justice, prevention, and collective responsibility aren't options, they are a duty. And we'd really like to be able to handle everything ourselves, but we can't. You are the ones who can take action. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Ms. Séguin, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. I am Mélanie Séguin. I'm here on the 26th of January 2026 to have some of our legislation amended, which I think that they're a little archaic given how society has evolved. Here are my requests: an amendment to renew the work permit, amendment on the legislation for passport retention when accidents occur. My daughter and child and companion took a road, and as they were returning work on the 32 East Highway, the 10 being closed, there was a detour. At 22:30, 8:30 in the evening, there was an accident involving 8 vehicles, including a 35-foot truck. At the time, the 11-year-old and the 2-year-old and the mother, basically about 10 people, if I'm correct, were grievously wounded. And some died. At about 3 in the morning, the announce of their deaths came in, and it continued to grievously wounded Mathieu and Benoit. A number of traumas in reading was organized by the SQ in Boucherville, the police service, to inform us that the accident was of a criminal nature, given the evidence they had based on a cell phone in the truck, but said that Mr. Singh had left the country under 24 hours after the accident, and no legislation authorizes the seizure of the passport. And the accusations against Mr. Bajit Singh are as follows: 2 accusations of dangerous driving having caused death, 3 charges of dangerous driving having caused grievous wounds. And I wonder why Mr. Singh's passport has not been seized, at least during the investigation. How could he have killed 2 people and wounded several more? A foreign temporary worker. Is he privileged enough to be allowed to left our country in such circumstances? I don't want our story to be the story of any other Canadian family. It has taken over 3 years to have the person brought back to Canadian soil with the collaboration of the U.S. Marshals and the police of Boucherville. And Mr. Singh is now being held and will face justice in Canada. How is it possible that he could have left the country and that his work permit has been renewed even though he already had criminal accusations in since January 2021 against him, and that he is held to be a victim even though he is the person being accused in this file, having committed 43 contraventions to the highway code in Ontario and Quebec before he finally killed someone. I have a petition in E4115 with which I was helped by Ms. Claude de Bellefeuille, MP Valleyfield. Why aren't there any changes to the legislation? No change has been made based on my requests and my petition. Even though several mistakes were made in this file, I have all the evidence of what I'm saying here today. And behind each of you, of course, there are families. You have families. Were it your sister, your mother, your daughter, what would you do? 2 briefs could be provided to you if needed, and I hope that my requests will be taken into consideration today. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ms. Séguin. Today, we'll begin with Mr. Groslo. Mr. Groslo, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Good day, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. Hello. This is a very difficult topic. I would like to begin by saying hello, Ms. Séguin, Ms. Poulin, and Ms. Boucher, for being here with us. You are very courageous. I know that this is very difficult for you. I, too, have children. I don't know how you feel. I can't imagine. And I find you so very courageous. I'm here to support you. Again, thank you for being here with us. First question, I will put it to Ms. Poulin. Ms. Nathalie Poulin, you're from Gauss and La Beauce, and we have met recently. I would like to know what your intentions are. What's the main message you would like to get across to the government here through this committee? That actions be undertaken. We need specific measures to ensure that road safety is ensured. It's not an administrative detail. If you know there are failures, there are gaps, if you see that it's not working, you can't close your eyes to this. You can't turn away from the facts. You're our only bulwark. That's the truth. If we want to keep our families safe on our roadways, we must turn to you. Transportation is a federal jurisdiction. Analyze each province. You have turned the management of this legislation over to the provinces. So is it really working? I can tell you no. They are not equipped to carry this through. This is what you need to do today. Recognize that negligence has irreversible consequences and deal with this. It should have been done before these terrible situations occurred. Now we'll have to deal with it, but we need to ensure that changes are made. There's no choice. I'm speaking for my daughter, but my daughter's not coming back. This isn't going to change anything. But there are so many other parents with empty seats around the table children facing an empty seat where their mother once was. And people wonder whether they'll come home alive because there are people who aren't trained, who've got trucks that are totally unmaintained, that have tractor trailers that aren't up to date. This makes no sense. It's your responsibility to ensure that change occurs. You have spoken of tools, mechanisms that we might be able to set up to avoid this. There are a number of them. Look, I've got this somewhere. But, first and foremost, when an accident such as this occurs, the first thing that's at issue is knowing whether that person is still driving and whether they could leave the country. And I'm not speaking only about foreign citizens, nationals who are here with temporary visas or whatever. Roger, who lives in Chicoutimi, or Jason, who lives in St. George, could also, be the author of such an accident, decide to take all his money out of the bank and leave the country. It's the same law for all. The law applies to all. It's not because someone comes from another country that it's, look, yeah, there may be another place that they can easily go back to, but, anyone can get on a plane and escape. That shouldn't happen, and it's up to the federal government to see to it that it doesn't. Licenses are provincial, but if an accident such as this occurs, it's obvious that those driving licenses should be suspended. We can't let these people go back to the road, go back to driving. Another accident could occur 3 weeks down the line. We know that this person is still driving. There is a registry. If it's an Ontario company, coming into Quebec, or the inverse, a Quebec company, someone driving into Ontario and is stopped at roadside enforcement, we've got no way of checking whether they are following the rules, whether the company is compliant. Same thing for insurance. We need a national registry, a national carrier database. You can't have entrepreneurs on the road and do it half-baked fashion. If there's a major issue with a truck, nothing happens. That's not normal either. Same thing as a mechanical inspection. We send a number of trucks who, pass. Well, it's clear that they have seen roadside enforcement and they've been weighed, but, the wheels are in poor condition. If I had that sort of maintenance, police officers would take my car off the road. They'd say, you've got to have it towed. But they've got killer machines. They've got incredible loads. How can they be allowed to drive in such circumstances? The provinces, you see, are unable to manage this. In Ontario, you can buy your license. And I'm sorry, we're not inventing this. We've seen this information. It just makes no sense. No better in Quebec. Thank you.
Floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, mesdames, et merci.
Good day, ladies, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us.
The committee, these terrible and in some cases very recent experiences that you've had, it must be very difficult, and we appreciate you being here with us today. I'd like to ask each of you if you could speak on, in the days and the weeks after the accidents that you each experienced, you would have had to interact with many different organizations. You would have interacted with local police. I believe you mentioned the Sûreté de Québec, potentially other levels of government or other investigators. Could you tell the committee what could be changed to improve the experience that you had dealing with those different officials and organizations after the accidents occurred? What changes would have made that immediate period after the accidents better from your perspective? We can start potentially with Madame Séguin.
Qu'est-ce qui aurait été mieux d'être fait?
Well, what would have been better in the media after the accident. It would have been seizing the passport because in under 24 hours after the accident, the person, the accused, left the country. Had the police gotten information from the Ontario Provincial Police, because there were already criminal accusations against this person's threats, for example, and there were already breaches of conditions for this person, and the passport should have been seized immediately. But you have to wake up a Chief Justice. There are a number of legal procedures you have to go through before you are able to do that. And the police officers told us that there was no presumption to the effect that, the person could actually leave the country. I'm not sure. I don't work for a police service, but if there's a breach of conditions, I'm sorry to say this, but look, to hell with the laws of the country. The person already is contravening, the law, and I was told the person has a right to take a vacation, and it could be prejudicial if we took away their passport, and it could be prejudicial. Well, whose is, at issue here? Whose rights have been violated? While it took 3 years to get the person back here into Canada, it's us, our families. So you have a duty to protect families from such drama, because I can tell you it takes a lot of strength to get through this sort of thing, all the administrative details needed before we could come here before you to speak to you in this committee. Because if we don't cry wolf in the real sense, scream that this has got to be handled, something's got to be done, no one is going to come to knock on our door saying, look, may we interrupt? We would like to help you. Not even the company, AJC Transport, as I saw it, that's had problems before with officials, the CNSST, that company has basically killed 2 members of our family and grievously harmed 2 others. Can you do anything at the time of the accident? Yes, seize the driver's license and the passport. That should be done immediately while the matter is investigated. Thank you, Ms. Siga. Ms. Boucher. I agree with Ms. Siga. Everything she has said about seizure. In my situation, what I find deplorable is that there was no follow-up. I met my investigator 3 weeks after my accident. I was still in a state of shock, in emotional turmoil, and they said they had done everything possible to get this into criminal court. The papers, the driver's license, the truck driver's license, he had a valid address in Ontario and another one in New Brunswick. He was working for CFEX that is based in Vaudreuil-Dorion in Quebec. Isn't that bizarre? No one asked, look, is this a real driver's permit, a real driver's license? We know that some have been sold. There was an article in the Journal de Montréal about someone who falsified driver's license. He had sold some in the Brampton region, and he was very irresponsible. But this wasn't criminal negligence. They didn't even try to prove that the person was distracted at the wheel by seizing the dash cam. It needed a witness. Someone would have had to say that they were using their cell phone while they were driving. I know that that wasn't checked for my car. There was no dash cam in my car. I wasn't using my cell, but there certainly was a dash cam in the truck. People who got in touch with me were the media to really, ring the bell, to get through to the Department of Transport, to the Ministry of Transport in Quebec, and at the federal level as well. I thought that the Minister of Transport would have been here this morning. I would have liked to see what they would say about my situation. I would like to have my investigator, who really cared about this, able to say 3 weeks after my accident, we have suspended his driver's license, he will no longer be driving, and there will be an investigation. That wasn't the case. So what else could I do? Push, challenge the system with the media around me, with social media. That's all I could do. My children were asking, why are you going to Parliament? Xavier invited me to, because Parliament didn't want to hear us, but we came nevertheless. We've had a press conference, and I'd pretty much done everything I could because the media had covered me a good deal. We nearly died. I nearly died in that accident. I could have died. But there was another accident in New Brunswick, for example, recently. And then in the United States, they seem to have started dealing with this. They have legislation now that will be adopted on the 21st of July 2026 that will really lead to very serious consequences, fines for the drivers, and up to $1 million for companies that hire low-cost truck drivers. That may be drastic, but I think that's what we need to do here as well, because what we know is that they are hiring these drivers, and we know that some of them have a model along these lines, to keep their own money in their own pockets. There are so many failures of the system, and there are some powerful people, some, people with power who are giving out low-cost contracts, and we have been victims of people who use these sort of schemes, and that is what we are denouncing. So, in my mind, the driver who was driving on the day of my accident was an illegal worker. Thank you, Ms. Boucher. I will allow Ms. Poulin, if she wishes, to add anything to Mr. Greaves' question. Yes, well, there are 3 things that need to be done when accidents such as these occur. I can't tell you whether this was a low-cost driver. I don't know. But what I can say is that it's obvious that there isn't enough training and enough vehicle maintenance. The first thing to do would be to seize the driver's license, seize the passport, and then have a special police squad that really investigates all trucks across the sector. That's what would help ensure everyone is safe. Thank you, Mr. Poulin. Mr. Greaves. Mr. Barthélemy-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Boucher, Ms. Poulin, Ms. Tegan, for being with us today. Your testimony went straight to my heart. We've read the articles and seen media content, but it's quite a whole different story hearing you in person, and I imagine this is difficult for you as well. I've been watching this file for quite some time now, this Driver Inc. situation, and what's going on is very serious. You have my full support to go as far as you need to resolve this issue. I hope that a report will be able to be produced and that we will make sure that things change. I was sad. It's a good thing that I was able to hear your voices today. I have a few questions for you. I did a bit of research on the 3 companies that were implicated in your 3 accidents. In the case of Armin Transport, that is linked to Ms. Séguin's accident. This company is a member of CTOA, which lobbies and promotes the Driver Inc. system. This company was also implicated in a train derailment on January 12th in Muskoka, where the driver actually parked on the rails. We also know that there have been shootings in these companies' buildings in their sites. In the case of SafeX Transport, that was implicated in Ms. Boucher's accident. I checked up on the Quebec's registry of company. This company says it's reported to have 49 employees. On the company's website, we learned that there are 150 trucks and a couple hundred other pieces of equipment, and there are 216 trucks and 200 plus drivers. So what about the gap between 30 employees and 200 drivers? In the case of Verville was caught violating various safety measures between July 2021 and February 2024. These 3 companies were reported to CNESST. In these circumstances, Given that it is being questioned that the driving model is causing accidents on the road, do you believe that this is random? The fact that these three companies have these things in common, and that the accidents and deaths that have occurred are random?
I don't think it's a coincidence. The person had an address. He was working in Brampton, and his driver's license was from Nova Scotia, if memory serves me well. And so Nova Scotia was his base, but he worked in Brampton, Ontario. And very oddly, wherever he went after leaving the country, very strange, the Orman Group was linked to his moves after he left the country until he came back to North America in April 2023. So I find this very unusual. Coincidence? No. Ms. Boucher. That's a lot of trucks for 24 to 36 employees on their website. Yes, I see a lot. I can say I see them from some distance. The logo's easy to recognize. At one point, I left the SAAQ offices, and there was a Syntex truck just right there at the light, and everyone I know send photos of these trucks to me as well. So we started checking, and I can tell you it didn't smell too good. Ms. Poulin? After the accident, we looked for answers. So we visited a number of sites, especially the site of the Transport Commission of Quebec. We learned a number of interesting things about the Verville Intermodal Group. Once they went before the Transportation Commission, and the decision there was that their security code was be conditional going forward. Their situation was unsatisfactory, it would seem, and they had lied about the number of employees working here, that these people weren't trained for security checks, vehicle maintenance checks, so that's a problem. And it would seem that most of the contraventions that occurred would involve a vehicle that had been stolen, but there's no police report on that. They couldn't give anything to the commission about that. Their mechanic is a foreign worker who doesn't have a worker's permit in Quebec. So all taken together, it's a pile of lies. And nevertheless, they were left with their work code conditional. Mr. Collot, over to you again. You have 5 minutes. Back to Ms. Poulin. To finish what we began, you suggest or proposed some solutions, creating, for example, a national driver's license database, also a squad able to carry out vehicle maintenance checks. Could you tell us more? Yes, of course, a database would help, a registry would help, but, a squad. When an accident kills someone, why doesn't someone go to that company, impound all the trucks, check them all? There could be 50 people working in the squad, 50. It would take 3.5 days, and pretty much everything would have been checked. You'd check to ensure everyone has a valid driver's license, because a number of them are driving, trucks, even though they have contraventions and aren't allowed to drive. We check to see whether they're trained, and why not run a little road test while you're at it? Just about, let's say, backing up, because my partner is in agriculture, he's a farmer, and we have trucks that deliver things. Out of 5, only 1 is able to back up correctly. The others, drive up on the road, they park, and then, the one who knows what they're doing gets into each truck and backs the truck up, because the other 4 drivers can't do it. That's what really happens in reality. So this squad, able to carry out a safety check, could check to see that everything's in order. The trucks, the mechanics, why not test people? Test the drivers. Can they back up? If you can't back up, you can't drive. These are basics. Ms. Poulin, you have approached all the authorities, levels of government, municipal, provincial, federal. According to you, who bears the responsibility for this accident that caused this death? I wrote that somewhere because I thought it was a good question and an important one. The responsibility. And look, I'd like to say everything I have to say on this, Mr. Chair, if you will allow. It's a collective failure. I, too, failed. Same thing for Melanie's accident. Same thing for Claudia's accident. It's society that has not been able to protect these people, and I mean everyone. People who buy, their transportation services at a discount. They realize that if there's something off in the price, somebody's paying the price. If there's a big difference in the price of an Amazon item, you buy it, it's not going to last as long. When you buy a carrier, their transportation services, it costs so little, then perhaps the truck isn't being maintained. Perhaps they've got a discount driver, a driver Inc. driver, and people who see things going wrong on the road. They, see people watching Netflix film in their truck. They film this and put it on Facebook. Yeah, that's lovely, but call the police officers while you're at it. Perhaps by calling the police, you could ensure that someone doesn't get killed 40 kilometers down the road by that trucker. And then people who carry out the tests to distribute licenses. We got a lot of calls, people saying, oh, we work at the Société and, we give out the licenses. It makes no sense who we give license to. And I say, well, why don't you call this out? You're telling me you're providing licenses to people who are incompetent. You say you have no choice in this matter. I understand these people need to be paid and they've got a job, but why doesn't anyone put their hand up? And the Transport Commission should be a good deal stricter, and perhaps the roadside enforcement officers, perhaps they don't have the tools to stop people. Perhaps someone who's driving with a logbook that's not linked to their driver's license, why aren't they stopped? Why aren't they arrested? That's something that has been requested among changes to federal regulations. Someone who's been driving for 48 hours in a row, but you can't check it in the logbook, you don't stop them. This leads to deaths. From now on, I think that if the government doesn't get to work on this, the next time there's a sad death, then everyone here will also be responsible for that death. Because now we know, because we're shedding light on this, if you do nothing based on what we're telling us, if you change nothing, you too will be responsible for the deaths to come. Thank you, Ms. Poulin. Before I turn to Ms. Wien, do I have the committee's permission to ask a single question of Ms. Poulin? Yes, thank you. Ms. Poulin, you mentioned that you have spoken to people who distribute driver's license to drivers and that someone said, we have no choice. We've got to give out these licenses. Could you elaborate on that? I'm saying, look, if someone doesn't merit if the license, if they haven't passed the test, why should they necessarily receive the license? Could you explain this to the committee? From what I know, based on what people have told me, first, and look, I speak for Quebec because that's where I'm from, but when they go to the Société de l'Automobile with their driver's license from their own country, first, in Quebec we can't check to see whether that is actually a driver's license a real one. It's written, driver's license in some foreign language. No one understands it. And they take for granted that, it seems that they don't ask too many questions. Then they help them. Even if they don't understand English or French, they help them pass their theoretical test by almost, providing them with the answers. And then, all said and done, when they go into a truck to carry out a practical test on the road, they say, they've got a lot of leeway because these people come from other countries and, we want to ensure that these people have driver's permits so they can work and contribute to Quebec.
Merci, Monsieur. J'ai oublié les mots, Chair. Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Beaucoup.
Thank you very much for being here. You are so courageous, sharing your knowledge with us, your stories with us. It's so important to us to hear this from you, directly from you. So thank you for being here. You have asked us as a government, as a federal government, to take stronger action and I'm sorry, I'll shift to English.
Stronger leadership role, and because of the way Transport Canada sets the guidelines, we set the rules around training, etc. What more would you like us to do? How do we step up? How do we encourage the provinces to work on that enforcement piece? Because it's not our place. It's Quebec that does that. It's Ontario that does the enforcement pieces and the licenses. But what does it look like for us to be able to ask the provinces to work better with us?
Well, among Xavier Berthelot-Duval's requests, there are 10. The tax issue is the only one that is being really discussed. I think that the passport and the right to travel should also be priorities. I particularly like points 1, 2, 5, and 6 among Mr. Berthelot-Duval's requests. When I gave a radio interview, I hoped that the government would work seriously on at least one other recommendation. Was I optimistic, hoping that at least they'd work on one? Well, right now I hope that working on 4 of them is a realistic request. 1, 2, 5, and 6. That's my choice.
No.
Ms. Seguin, have you anything to add? No. Ms. Poulin? I don't know. I don't know what the best solution is going to be. But you have instituted mandatory training that the provinces must ensure. Why don't you continue? Do more. They need this minimal training, of course, but intervene across the board, everything. Penalties, for example, someone who doesn't carry out their brake tests, do you know how much they have to pay? It's only $500. That's the only penalty, $500 to, go down a steep incline and kill someone at the bottom. So expensive, $500. Even if they know how to put their brakes on, they can ice. If they put the brakes going down and they don't take them off intermittently, they'll ice up, so the brakes won't work. The government, the federal government, has got to really go back to the basic elements of safe transportation, safety, driver's license, maintenance. You've got to go over everything. You've got a number of associations that lay out all the problems for you to see. A lot of people want to get involved. So use them. Take us. We'll come in droves. I'll come. That's what I've said from the outset. I want to, as of tomorrow morning, know in my heart that this accident did not occur for nothing. That out of all this, something will develop, something will ensure that all our roads are safer. That's all we're asking for, but no one wants to hear that. Mr. Chair, I would like to add something. Yes, you have the floor. Perhaps if we had all of Canada law rather than having, legislation in each territory, in each province, in Quebec, there's an example. There was someone who was pulled over 148 kilometers an hour, $108 was the fine, something like that. It was at Télé Nouvelle. If it were $10,000, why couldn't it be a federal law that we all face the same consequences, the same law applied across the entire country? It's super clear whether you're in Manitoba, Quebec, or Ontario, wherever you are, it's the same rules, and that using your cell phone at the wheel be banished, unacceptable in any vehicle whatsoever, because that, from what I've read, is what mostly causes the accidents, distractions at the wheel. This leads to deaths on our roadways. If we had a single law that applied across the country, there would be no confusion, or like, oh, but, I'm in Ontario now, or look, I'm sorry. 43 contraventions that this person had done. He hadn't slept when he should, leaving from Brampton, Ontario, when he's somewhere else. And now in Quebec, I'm told that there is no easy way to take him before a court because he should have been in Ontario, or if he were in Ontario, then the contravention would apply, but no in Quebec, and so on. I was told, Mr. Benmar, the former Minister of Justice, told me that personally. So we need a pan-Canadian law so that everyone is treated equally. Thank you, Ms. Seguin, and thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Boucher, you referred to this earlier. I'll pick up on it. In October, I believe, we worked on 10 requests. The federal government did requests of the trucking sector that should be used. Unfortunately, the government has only instituted one of the 10, and you have referred to this. I would like to know whether you've had a chance to glance at these requests and if there are any that you would like to specifically speak to. Perhaps, Ms. Poulin, you could begin. Yes, I have looked at them very carefully, and the one that most struck me is the one in which you mentioned logbooks not lining up with driver's license. How can you be in a situation where you can't stop a truck, pull a truck off the road, when you can't even validate whether the driver is in a state to be driving it? Because, there's this logbook situation. The feds requested that. It's a rule. But if you've got a logbook, but then someone else is driving under another name and no one can link the logbook to the person driving, it makes no sense. It can't be used. This is pretty easy. You're stopped, pulled over anywhere in Canada, a roadside enforcement. You see the logbook and the license, you see it together, and then, if necessary, you pull the truck off the road. It's the simplest thing to do, the quickest and easiest thing to do, and it is very likely to save lives. Thank you, Ms. Seguin. I won't speak to this for now. That's fine. 30 seconds left. Perhaps for Ms. Boucher, if you had the Minister of Transportation, as you hoped you might have before you here today, is there a message you would give them or that you would like to give this committee about how things should be changed? Yes, of course. The points that you have brought up in those 10 requests, I think they are all relevant. As for having a single set of rules that would apply across the country, I had mentioned at the press conference that that's what I think makes sense. I think that makes it easier to follow up when you go from province to province. If we had spoken about that via Alison Dumont and Alexandra Tremblay, we had mentioned that. We had talked about it, that if someone at an inspection, roadside point, if they're weighed, when they're weighed, they have to pull over there and they're inspected there at the roadside, then there could be better follow-up across the provinces. We're far too divided. We really need a single approach. There's also the blacklist, or something about investigations, of non-compliant businesses, trucking enterprises that I also thought was relevant. So those are really the points 1, 2, 5, and 6 that I mentioned earlier. That's what I would present to the Department of Transport. Thank you, Mr. Groslo. We're back to you. You have 2.5 minutes this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I thank you for being here with us, for sharing your testimony. You're testifying very well, by the way, if I may, and very courageously. Thanks again. My question is for Ms. Boucher and Ms. Seguin. What are your expectations? What do you hope for after today's meeting? What do you expect of us, elected officials? What I expect is that the human side of all this speaks to you and that you respond. Not necessarily human, but look, you have families too. If this happened to you, would there be some, special law that would come in if it were Mr. Trudeau's children who were killed? Surely. Would you continue giving out driver's license so that they could come kill us? I hope not. I hope that today is the very last time that you will allow these people to come kill us on our roadways, giving them the power to do that. I hope this is the end. Nathalie, would you like to add something? Oh, my heavens. Look, today, you just got to get down to business. You just got to get the job done. Today, we have the ability, you have the power to save lives. That's what I've come to tell you. You have this power. If I cry out, if I speak to every single reporter, I won't be able to do it. We can help you, but we won't be able to do it all alone. You have the power to tell us that our families, our children, your families and your children, because this can happen to anyone. It was a bus carrying 45 children that was at, issue that day, and had they all been killed, would this still be going on? I don't know. But you have the power to do something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say thank you so much. It's often said that leadership is the act of servicing others and not yourself. And you're doing that today by telling us your story, your profound story of loss. And I appreciate it. I know every MP and every staffer here appreciates it. So thank you so much. I think most of you, the three of you here today, you talked about your experiences, and some of that goes to federal, provincial, shared responsibility. But I'm wondering, would you like to see the committee include in our report elements of the things that you talked about that are provincial, that need to be tightened up, and to share that with the transport departments that are provincial across Canada? Is that what I'm hearing? You'd like to not just the federal government, although that we're key here, but also sharing this report, this recommendation with the other with the provincial governments in Canada. Do I get a thumbs up for that, or thumbs down?
Je vais commencer avec Madame Seguin.
Tout à fait d'accord.
We'll begin with Ms. Seguin. I fully agree. Ms. Boucher. Yes, I agree.
I also, with limited time, when I hear of things such as enforcement and investigations and training or lack thereof, because let's be frank, some of the stories we've heard today and in previous testimony, the level of training is jaw-dropping, lack thereof. And I'm wondering, do you see a role for the federal government to be more involved in those elements that are provincial, or some type of deeper shared responsibility Do you see that as something that is something we should look at in terms of a recommendation?
Au niveau de la formation,
Well, about training, it's, basically federal. The provinces set it up too late, too little in December 2025, and so far it's not up to par. Do they still distribute licenses? I don't know. But so far, the training is inadequate. They don't provide for it. It's complicated. But what worries me is that everyone who got their driver's license earlier and without the training, well, they're out there. Couldn't, a minimum amount of training set in by the federal government also involve asking the provinces to, ensure that ongoing training is provided, that people who, can't prove that they took their course over the last 10 years be obliged to upgrade, go back to some sort of training such that the provinces could be sure that people are able to drive or competent to drive. That's one idea, because right now we've got no way of knowing. Thank you. Once again, to all three of you, sincere thanks for having shared your personal stories with us. This is of considerable help to us with the report that we are going to work hard to produce, to share with the Minister of Transport here at the federal, and also with our colleagues in the provinces and territories.
For 2 minutes to allow for the clerk to invite the next round of witnesses. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair. Colleagues, I'd now like to welcome the witnesses for the second half of today's panel. We'll begin with from Caledon Community Road Safety Advocacy Group, Ms. Amanda Corbett, Director, welcome, Ms. Carmela Palkowski, Director, and Franca Pisani, Director, welcome to all three of you. We have from Justice for Truck Drivers, Navneet Ajla, Service Director, Labor Community Services of Peel, joining us by video conference. Welcome to you. And from the Joy Smith Foundation, we have Ms. Janet Campbell, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to you as well. We'll begin with our opening remarks, and for that, I will turn the floor over to you, Ms. Corbett. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Carmela. So thank you very much for having us here today. The Caledon Community Road Safety Advocacy Group was formed in September 2024 after the death of a young woman in our community, Adriana Milena McCauley. Her mother, Pia, is here today with us in the gallery. On September 10th, 2024, the 23-year-old was killed after a transport truck driver ran a red light, a whole 10 seconds after the light turned red. She had just completed her first university degree, traveled safely countless times, only to lose her life 30 seconds away from home. Our community has reached its limits. We are now a not-for-profit organization with residents coming together across Ontario advocating for change.
If you get into an accident, make sure you kill them. Injured will cost you more. A truck driver once told me he overheard companies say this to their drivers. I will never forget that. It reflects a system where profit is placed above human life. While my colleagues will address the broader road safety crisis, I want to focus on a CRA accountability in the trucking industry. In 2006, the CRA introduced a T5018 reporting system in the construction to address the underground economy, recognizing that T4As were not sufficient. Today, the same lack of compliance exists in trucking and transportation. A similar reporting model should be considered. Shippers or brokers should be required to report the gross payment to carriers and owner-operators for anyone moving goods or people. This will support CRA cross-auditing, close long-standing compliance gaps, and improve transparency. This recommendation is made in interest of public safety, fairness, and compliance, not on behalf of any private or commercial interest.
I'll begin now.
Living in Caledon, which borders Brampton and Vaughan, is living in ground zero for truck industry chaos. We are experiencing a public safety crisis. This is not an exaggeration. A typical daily commute involves cars surrounded by trucks in every lane and car drivers taking risks to get around the extreme congestion. Trucks with improperly trained drivers, pulling U-turns on highways, driving at speed on the road shoulder in the opposite direction of traffic, pulling into oncoming traffic from narrow roads and driveways, and bullying car drivers. Recently, there's a drastic increase in extortion crimes, with bullets flying into homes and businesses. It's not if, it's when something horrible will happen. We are surrounded by illegal truck yards, where trucks, trailers, and intermodal containers are stored on improperly zoned land. Residents are impacted with endless noise, traffic congestion, environmental concerns, and potential for organized crime, just to mention a few. This isn't happening just in Caledon or Ontario. It's happening across Canada. To effectively address these public safety concerns, simply lifting the T4A moratorium is not enough. All levels of government need to be accountable for working consistently and collaboratively to make meaningful changes within their purview. Canada needs a national commercial driver safety registry accessible to enforcement officers to ensure meaningful accountability instead of relying on fragmented provincial systems, as some drivers routinely move between provinces or carriers. Regarding the criminal justice system, Adriana's death exposed a serious gap in how Canada treats fatal negligence involving commercial drivers, currently handled under provincial offenses, often with minimal sentences. There needs to be federal recognition that, for example, a fully loaded transport truck running a red light is not comparable to inattentive driving or a momentary judgment error. When a commercial driver causes a death, it should trigger mandatory criminal code consideration and not default to provincial offenses. Sentencing guidance must account for the elevated professional duty of commercial drivers and the associated risk of severity and harm. We fully support good truck drivers and companies, even owner-operators or independent drivers who follow the law. and take their responsibilities seriously. They are all an essential part of our economy, and without them, our lives would look very different. I'll pass it to Carmela.
Every level of government needs to come together to implement change. No matter what political party, this is a public safety crisis. Weapons on our road being driven by unqualified drivers who are putting their lives and our lives at risk. What's next? Unqualified pilots in the air? This is a crisis across this country, and this must be addressed now. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening remarks. Next, we'll turn the floor over to Ms. Adjala. Ms. Adjala, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Navi Adjala, and I am the Service Director at Labor Community Services of Peel, or LCSP, a nonprofit organization that provides free employment law services. LCSP works closely with Justice for Truck Drivers, a grassroots advocacy group made up of frontline drivers, a large majority who have personally experienced wage theft and labor violations. Justice for Truck Drivers holds monthly meetings with its members, and we collect data on working conditions through meetings with drivers, surveys, and casework. Today, I welcome the opportunity to speak with you about the changing landscape for truck drivers in Canada. That landscape is dire. I want to be clear from the outset. Our drivers oppose Drivers Inc. But as one driver told us, Drivers Inc. is just one branch on a rotten tree. The real rot is weak enforcement and outdated laws that allow wage theft without consequence and put drivers and the public's lives at risk. The data supports this. In 2000, 70% of confirmed Canada Labour Code violations occurred in road transport. Even though trucking accounts for only 17% of federally regulated workers, that number rose to 85% by 2022. In just the past 2 years, LCSP has received calls from over 300 federally regulated truck drivers reporting labor violations. Despite filing complaints with the Federal Labor Program, we find that drivers are still unable to access their rights, while employers continue to break the law with little consequence. At present, 83 drivers that we represent have Canada Labour Code decisions confirming they are collectively owed $696,000 in unpaid wages. Yet they have been unable to enforce those rulings or recover their stolen earnings. The employers have faced no consequences. Drivers Inc. did not create the exploitation of drivers. The deregulation of the trucking industry in the 90s produced a highly competitive sector dominated by shippers and brokers that rely on low-cost tendering. Transport companies respond to shrinking margins by cutting labor costs and shifting business risks onto drivers and owner-operators. Misclassification has long been embedded in the industry by large and small companies, new and established alike. Drivers Inc. is just one manifestation of this broader problem. As Drivers Inc. companies face increased scrutiny, many simply adopt alternative misclassification models, such as using temp agencies with little capital that can open and close quickly to shift a liability for misclassification, hiring drivers as so-called lease operators, forcing them to lease company trucks while still exerting full employer control, and contracting owner-operators who are classified as independent contractors, even though the company dictates schedules, routes, and conditions of work. This is why addressing misclassification solely through tax mechanisms is not enough. When enforcement focuses on tax compliance instead of labor standards, it ignores the power imbalance in trucking. Employers continue to exploit loopholes while drivers face large tax bills and penalties. Yet that same process does not recover their unpaid wages or benefits that should have been paid by the employer in the first place. Employers break the law, but workers absorb the financial harm. The result for drivers is punishment without protection. It's not just because of misclassification, but wage theft is also built into everyday pay practices in trucking. Unpaid labor is routine in this industry. Many drivers are paid by mile, but mileage is calculated using shortest route apps that do not reflect actual miles driven due to traffic, construction, or detours. The majority of non-driving work also goes unpaid. Drivers routinely report not being paid for required duties such as loading and unloading, inspections, maintenance, and border wait times. Illegal deductions are also widespread. Employers often avoid using company insurance for vehicle or cargo damage and instead withhold drivers' wages, sometimes holding back entire paychecks. Not only are drivers facing declining wages, but these are all forms of wage theft that we get calls about every day. There are deep systemic failures in the road transport sector that must be addressed. Stephen Laskowski, CEO of the Canadian Trucking Alliance, told this committee on October 7th, "Do not trust us. We do not have the proper oversight, enforcement, and penalties." We agree. What is needed is a broad system-wide review of the trucking industry. Drivers are demanding an end to all misclassification practices, not just Drivers Inc., enforcement through labor standards, not tax mechanisms that punish drivers instead of powerful companies, decent wages, payment for all hours worked and all miles driven, an end to illegal deductions and wage theft, real enforcement with meaningful penalties that deter violations and hold employers accountable. Anything less will allow exploitation to continue and drivers will keep paying the price. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adjla. Next, we'll go to Ms. Campbell. Ms. Campbell, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Our organization was founded by Joy Smith, a former member of Parliament herself, who during her time in Parliament successfully introduced 2 private members' bills that amended the Criminal Code of Canada to strengthen Canada's response to human trafficking. That legislative work helped lay the foundation for how human trafficking is defined and prosecuted in our country today. For more than 30 years, Joy Smith and our foundation have supported survivors, trained frontline professionals, and worked with governments at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. We work closely with law enforcement, service providers, and international partners to help ensure that Canada's response reflects both lived experience and established legal standards. To date, we have supported more than 7,000 survivors of sex trafficking and forced labor. Consistent throughout our work, human trafficking is often misunderstood, while it hides in plain sight. Under the UN Palermo Protocol, which Canada has ratified, human trafficking consists of 3 elements: an act, a means such as coercion or abuse of vulnerability, and a purpose of exploitation. The International Labour Organization further operationalizes this through 11 indicators of forced labor, which are widely used by governments and courts around the world to assess risk. When we apply that framework, we see that labor trafficking often emerges not from a single illegal act, but from systems that concentrate power on one side of employment, relationship, and they remove a meaningful choice from a worker. Our foundation is seeing a steady increase in forced labor cases and indicators coming to our office, particularly in sectors where immigration dependency and misclassification intersect. This is where the trucking industry enters this discussion for us today. In 2024, we launched an awareness campaign called Trafficking Report in response to the patterns we were seeing in the trucking industry in particular. As this committee has heard, Driver Inc. undermines labor standards, distorts competition, and erodes road safety. Those impacts are very real, and this is impacting real lives, which we've heard today in the heartbreaking stories from the courageous witnesses earlier. What our work at the Foundation adds to this conversation is an explanation of how, in certain conditions, those same structures can meet internationally recognized thresholds for forced labor. That risk increases significantly when misclassification is combined with immigration dependency. When a worker's income, housing, legal status, and pathway to permanent residency are all tied to a single employer, the balance of power shifts. When that worker is also indebted through recruitment or training fees, isolated from community supports, and unable to change employers without serious consequences, reporting abuse becomes unsafe. In international terms, this is what abuse of vulnerability looks like. Based on our work, the patterns we see in the trucking sector include debt bondage through recruitment costs, deception about wages and working conditions, withholding of documents, threats related to immigration status, and physical violence, systemic wage theft, unpaid overtime, excessive hours, isolation, and unsafe conditions. When multiple indicators of coercion are present, this creates an environment where forced labor thrives, regardless of whether the industry itself is legal or regulated. This helps explain why enforcement alone has struggled. Workers often cannot report safely, remedies are slow or unenforced, and companies can dissolve and reemerge while workers are left without wages or status. I want to be clear that this is not about casting suspicion on the entire trucking industry. It's about aligning Canada's trucking, labor, and immigration systems with the international standards and criminal code provisions that Canada already has committed to uphold. Canada does have some strong laws, and of course, there's more work that can be done. But what matters now is ensuring that our systems do not unintentionally enable human trafficking that those laws were designed to prevent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. We'll now turn it over directly to our first questioner, our first MP, and that will go to Mr. Seaback. Mr. Seaback, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today to talk about this issue. I really want to thank the CCRSA. You're from my riding, and you do such great work and advocacy trying to bring this issue. It's impressive that you've been able to bring it at the local level, the provincial level, and now here at the national level. And your sort of passion and hard work is going to be very beneficial as we try and figure out the solution to all of these things. When I listen to what I've heard today and having had conversations with you, it seems to me like this is not just a one level of government challenge. And there's multiple things that have to happen at multiple levels of government. It'd be great if the federal government took leadership on that. But if you could just sort of describe what do you think would be the way forward on all sort of at all levels of government? Do you have an idea on what that would look like?
Yes, I think really this has to be sort of an ongoing conversation with all levels of government participating, with residents as well. In our particular case, we live in Ontario. We've tried to have many conversations with the Ontario government. Unfortunately, not a lot of listening is happening, or if they're listening, they're not taking a lot of action. And there really needs to be an understanding that this is across Canada. This is a problem with all provinces. And I do think, quite frankly, that Ontario is, there's a lot happening in Ontario that's also causing problems in other provinces. And there really needs to be just an ongoing conversation and willingness for each level of government to do what's within their purview to actually make real change that residents living in their communities can see an improvement.
So if I were to look at your statement and what I've heard today, it sounds like the tax part of it is one element, certainly with the Drivers Inc. aspect of this. You'd say that's a big part of the problem?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Mm-hmm.
So you'd be very supportive of finding some new way to deal with, through the tax code and audit and compliance, to deal with cracking down on the companies that are operating under the Drivers Inc. model.
Yeah, I'll let Franca jump in on that if you want, Franca.
So undoing the T4As is just not enough. They're easy to be manipulated, and they're easy to also, if somebody has a few family members, split it up between everybody. But the thing is if you do a T5018, which is something similar, which is happening in the construction industry, which had cleaned up the underground economy. And so basically, if you have the shipper themselves give a T5018 to the brokers or the carriers, the broker carrier, they issues the T4A to the driver, you've got something to audit with. Because if they've gotten the broker sends the carrier broker a T5018 said, you've made so much money, but this is all you've dished out in T4As, there's a problem.
Right.
So it's just a cross audit. And that really helped the construction industry.
And when you talk about also the licensing requirement, my understanding is a significant part of the problem has also been people obtaining licenses without actually taking the course. So some fraudulent schools, I would take it that that's part of this problem that needs to be cracked down on as well.
Absolutely. And the other problem is they've actually caught a number of fraudulent schools. But what happened to those individuals that obtained licenses from those schools?
It seems to me like I guess you would support that those licenses be revoked and they would have to retest that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if we follow this down to the municipal level, there's also a problem there because a lot of the drivers that are operating under Drivers Inc. that have obtained these licenses from these fake driving schools, they're probably operating out of an illegal truck yard.
It's very likely that that's happening, yes. It's very likely.
And what do you think the solution to that is?
Well, there's a lot of solutions, but I think the main one is for the province of Ontario and perhaps other provinces that are dealing with this is to actually act on some of the recommendations that have been made both through us and through our municipal government as well. They need the ability to be able to block the driveways of these particular properties. They need to drastically increase the fines that they're given because right now it's really just a cost of doing business. A few $100s is completely irrelevant when you're making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands a day. And also the ability to put those fines on the title of the property so they can't just sell to a family member or change the name of the company and wash their hands of the situation.
And if the federal Minister of Transportation were here, I take it you would urge them to make this like a huge priority for the safety of all Canadians, to take some leadership on this and bring provinces online.
Yes, I would say given the lack of response that we're having from the Ontario government and the fact that this problem is happening all across Canada, if there was some federal action that could happen that either forces the provinces to actually do something or take some sort of a policy stance, that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Ms. Corbett. Thank you, Mr. Seaback. Next, we'll go to Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for joining us this morning as we continue this important discussion. My question is for Ms. Ojla, so thank you for being with us today. As you noted during your remarks, safety standards are set at the federal level, but we know that as with most rules, you know, the standards that are set are really only as good as the enforcement on the ground. And in this case, the enforcement is largely undertaken by provincial and municipal partners. So I'm wondering if you could speak to what you've heard from drivers operating in Peel Region or others whom you've interacted with in terms of how often they are seeing or interacting with either law enforcement or provincial officials or inspectors who are conducting roadside inspections, or audits that might help mitigate against some of these unsafe conditions.
Yes, thank you for your question. So the majority of drivers that are calling us or part of Justice for Truck Drivers are federally regulated truck drivers. And there's actually a lot that the federal government could be doing in order to make sure that, safety and labor standards are followed. A lot of it starts from the fact that when drivers are raising issues and filing complaints to the Canada Labor Code, there is very little effective enforcement. It's grossly underfunded at the federal level. And what it signals to companies is that they can actually engage in labor violations without consequence, without any meaningful fines, and it tells the drivers that they have nowhere to turn to. So a lot of the issues that we're seeing are because companies are being allowed to cut corners through not following labor laws properly and not for drivers to not have a place that they can turn to in order to actually enforce their rights, right? So it is a safety issue when we talk about drivers' rights and making sure that they can access their protections through the Canada Labor Code. And that's why we're seeing that enforcement from that level is actually going to solve a lot of these issues. It's not just misclassification. It's not just something that's going to be that should be examined through the CRA lens, but it's something where the Canada Labor Code needs to be effectively enforced so that drivers can get their rights.
Thank you for that response. I appreciate that. That's certainly a fair point. What you're describing is a situation in which a driver has proactively made a complaint or filed some kind of complaint with the federal government, which is certainly relevant. But in terms of their experiences of actually driving, being on the job, can you speak a little bit about the other kinds of interactions they may be having? How frequently, for example, roadside audits, being pulled over by police, inspections, that kind of activity? Is that something that you're hearing from your drivers about as well?
Yeah, they do commonly get inspected. They do get pulled over on scales. But again, they face a lot of pressure from employers to be pushed in order to drive vehicles that are not properly maintained or to drive hours over what is allowed. And so they have nowhere to turn to in order to even let somebody know that the company is pushing them this way. Basically, the whole responsibility falls on them to refuse that, but then the employer simply says that they're not going to give them any more work. So again, it comes down to them being able to enforce their rights and protections in order to be able to say no to unsafe work or to say no to driving a vehicle that's not maintained without fear of losing their job or financial retaliation.
Okay, thank you for that. That actually segues into my next question, which is for Ms. Campbell. Thank you for being with us today, Ms. Campbell. We know that newcomers and international workers are often targeted by bad actors, by companies with some dubious practices for recruitment. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that in terms of what are some of the promises or the commitments that are made to lure individuals into working in unsafe conditions in the trucking sector?
Well, they are often lured to Canada under pretense of being able to build a better life for themselves. And what happens in the situations is it's all of these administrative factors that we've been hearing about, like the labor violations, tax misclassifications, immigration compliance. All of these things basically don't reveal themselves in their full picture to any one of those entities. And law enforcement often doesn't have visibility to that, to actually be able to look at these pictures from a criminal code assessment standpoint. And so these workers come to Canada. They are promised that they are supported to be follow proper immigration pathways. They'll have great jobs. But what happens is they arrive in our country and it's all the things that we've been hearing about today. And then what happens is they become so fearful of reporting that ultimately these cases end up falling into the gaps between these various jurisdictions and administrative processes, but the signs are there.
Thank you for that. So in light of exactly what you just spoke to, are there particular measures that have been implemented in other jurisdictions or that we might learn from, best practices to help mitigate the flow of workers into an unsafe industry on the basis of these false promises?
There's a number of steps that we can take. For instance, the Drivers Inc. model, the misclassification, that is something that really adds to the layers of vulnerability that somebody who comes to our country through some sort of temporary worker permit has. So we need to look at those kinds of things and remove that ability for that layer. You need a lot of cross-agency collaboration and enforcement. There's some great data between the different agencies, whether it's ESDC, CRA, IRCC, CBSA, and taking the data and the information that we have and having the training and understanding of what those indicators are from a forced labor standpoint to then be able to elevate those into pathways where they can be considered for criminal assessment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, and thank you, Mr. Gries. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Avez-vous la parole?
Now, Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thanks you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for their presence. I think that your testimony is of great importance to the committee, and I'll take advantage of this to say that I'm quite frustrated not having heard you earlier. I think we should have heard you last year. It's quite unacceptable that we have lost so much time in this committee before we could get back to work on this important study. Let me begin with a question for Ms. Ojla, the Director of the Labour Community Service of Peel. You mentioned in your opening statement a little earlier that, yes, you are against the Driver Inc. model, but that there are other issues as well affecting the trucking industry. And some witnesses have come before us to say that, you know, the industry issues are kind of individual. They're isolated examples, that there's no link between these isolated examples. But I would like to know, from your point of view, the truckers or the companies that come to you complaining that they can't get paid, is there any link to be made between those companies and the Driver Inc. model?
So I would say the link is in the sense that companies are being allowed to use various methods to basically put liability back on workers, not follow kind of the labor rights that they're supposed to give to drivers. And so misclassification is one of those pieces alongside the other rampant labor violations that we're seeing. So it's linked in the sense that companies are kind of being allowed to break the law in a myriad of ways, and misclassification is one of those, but it's certainly not the only one. So because they're being allowed to steal workers' wages and again put liability back on drivers, we really need just better laws and protections to make sure that drivers are able to access their rights. And again, this needs to happen through the Canada Labour Code.
Peut-être une autre question pour vous, c'est de savoir, à votre avis.
Another question for yourself. In your view, because you mentioned earlier that over 300 drivers have come to you to lodge complaints with you, do you think that this practice of not respecting the law, mistreating drivers, is it an isolated phenomena or is it widespread in the sector? Second part of my question, do you think that those who adopt the Driver Inc. model, do the drivers enthusiastically get involved, or is this like forced on them by their employer?
The statistics show that it's a widespread issue. So we get hundreds of calls from truck drivers, but even statistics from the Canada Labour Code itself. So as I mentioned in my presentation, in 2022, 80% of confirmed Labour Code violations were from the road transport industry, even though trucking only accounts for 17% of federally regulated truck drivers. So it's clearly a systemic issue and it's really widespread in trucking. As for the second question, sorry, can you repeat it?
Oui, à savoir si les chauffeurs
yes. As to whether drivers who come to see you are often forced to incorporate under the Drivers Inc. model. It's not their own choice.
Oui, merci.
So would you confirm that? Thank you. Perhaps another question also for yourself. You mentioned that you're dissatisfied with the time taken by the Canadian Council for Industrial Relations to deal with any file. It seems, you know, take forever. How long does it actually take as of when a driver comes to you and that Industrial Relations Board provides some sort of ruling? Weeks, months?
Great question, because one thing that the CRA's kind of using the CRA to enforce misclassification does not address is the power imbalance between drivers and employers. Drivers often do not have a choice of how they are classified, and there is a lot of reasons that they are pushed into it, maybe a lack of education, but there is a clear power imbalance that the Labour Code recognizes, but that when you only kind of enforce this through the CRA, it's missing that power imbalance. So there's often no meaningful ability to refuse incorporation or challenge their status. And so what happens is when the enforcement is happening through CRA, the drivers are going to get penalized, but it's not going to restore their lost wages, their unpaid overtime, or their denied statutory protections. So to answer your question, oftentimes they do not have a choice. Your second question was, the length of time that it takes when drivers file complaints. It can easily take 2 to 3 years. So at this point, if a driver files a complaint with a Canada Labour Code today, it's going to take 14 to 16 months just for a Canada Labour Code officer, a labor program officer, to be assigned to the case. Then you have another year or two of the investigation taking place before there's a payment order issued.
Merci. Comme il ne me reste pas beaucoup de temps, je vais vous interrompre, mais je peux
Thank you.
vraiment...
As I have little time, I will interrupt you, but I wanted to say this is quite scandalous. 2 to 3 years to, get through a file and ensure someone gets paid. It makes no sense, given that we know these people need their wages to live on. They're poorly paid as it is. I'm very surprised to learn of this. So a last quick question. Is there a way to deter, are the current deterrences for these businesses sufficient? Do we need more?
Absolument. Il en faut plus. Il y a beaucoup de non-conformités et de pertes de temps. Beaucoup d'employeurs ne finissent pas par payer les employés et ne sont pas confrontés à des conséquences. Le système encourage les sociétés à violer la loi parce qu'elles réalisent des profits. Nous passons à M. Seeback. Je vais raccourcir les séries de questions parce que nous ne pouvons siéger que jusqu'à 13h17. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais revenir au CCRSA. Je sais que la question des sociétés de camionnage illégales n'est pas nécessairement fédérale. Vous avez mentionné les amendes et le fait qu'elles ne suffisent pas. D'après ce que j'en comprends, le maire de Carleton et d'autres maires ont contacté la province de l'Ontario pour demander une augmentation de ces sanctions afin de sévir contre ce fléau, afin de décourager ces pratiques et décourager les mauvais acteurs. Pourriez-vous me parler de cet effort? Où en sommes-nous? Le maire de Carleton a participé à une réunion la semaine dernière et a annoncé un changement législatif, mais nous n'en connaissons pas encore la teneur. Nous avons essayé de rencontrer la province et notre députée, Sylvia Jones. Ça a été très difficile de la contacter. Nous avons eu du mal à échanger avec elle. Nous avons pu la rencontrer une fois de force en suivant quelqu'un d'autre. Nous lui avons demandé ce dont nous avions besoin et ce que le maire de Carleton avait besoin pour le sévir contre ces sociétés illégales et nous attendons encore sa réponse. Cela fait maintenant 4 mois que nous attendons. Donc, nous allons voir de quoi il en retourne. Queen's Park revient le 23 mars, donc nous devons attendre 1 mois et demi, presque 2 mois, pour connaître leur réponse. Nous devinons que ce ne sera pas assez fort pour pour lutter contre cette situation. Donc nous poursuivons nos efforts et nous attendons le retour de Queen's Park.
Merci beaucoup. Madame Angela, vous avez parlé de 2-3 ans au CRB pour des cas similaires. Vous avez dû faire de plaidoyer. Il semblerait qu'il y ait un problème de ressources et de financement au niveau du CRB. Est-ce que vous voudriez aller plus en détail sur ce point? Oui, je suis d'accord que la mise en œuvre n'est pas faite comme il se faut. Il faudrait plus de force pour ces agents. Et il faut également des conséquences et des sanctions plus adéquates. Est-ce que vous pensez est-ce que votre organisation pense que des changements au code du travail vont permettre de répondre à certains des points que vous mentionnez? Je suis d'accord qu'il y a en effet un déséquilibre dans le rapport de force. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'il y a des changements qu'on peut faire au code du travail qui peut aider concernant cette situation? Si vous avez des éléments, vous pourriez les partager. Et si vous ne les avez pas maintenant, vous pourrez les soumettre au comité pour qu'on puisse les inclure au rapport. Nous avons fait des soumissions par le passé. Nous avons partagé aussi ces éléments avec le ministère du Travail.
that drivers have more than 6 months to file a complaint, making sure there's meaningful fines and consequences, and including changes to the Canada Labour Code itself to make sure that drivers are actually paid adequately for all the time that they work. Right now, there's a huge issue of a lot of labor that goes unpaid as well, and just more measures to ensure that drivers are able to speak up and access justice.
Thank you.
So you submitted these in 2023, and have the changes that you've requested been made or are in the current budget or any legislation the government has?
No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seebeck, and thank you, Ms. Ajla. Next, we'll go to Ms. Wien. Ms. Wien, the floor is yours. You have 4 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. Extraordinary to hear your efforts to kind of come together and advocate for the community first in terms of safety where you're living. And for those who are online, thanks for your time today. I wanted to ask about other tools in other jurisdictions. One of the things that came to mind for me is like a whistleblower line or other ways in which we can get information around what's happening in the in the industry. Would measures like that assist in terms of having people who are being exploited as these drivers come forward in a way that is protecting their safety? Ms. Campbell, do you want to start? And then I can go to Ms. Ojala.
We get these kinds of calls to our office because oftentimes individuals that are in the situation that we've talked about where they literally do feel trapped, they do feel like they have no choice, they're being threatened, they're under control, they are being threatened about getting in trouble themselves with the law and all these kinds of things. It prevents them sometimes from wanting to talk with some of the agencies, such as law enforcement, because their perpetrators have instilled such fear and they're under such pressure. And when they have tried to raise their hand with respect to some of the missed wages and other treatment like that, what's happening is their entire picture on those cases that are forced labor aren't seen in its entirety, and these are falling really through the gaps.
I'm sorry, I had a bit of trouble hearing with the interpretation. Could you repeat the question as well?
The question was about whether other tools like a whistleblower line might be useful in this context. I think there are, so something like that.
Yes,
I know that that's
definitely.
been successful in other sectors.
Yes, definitely. And that's actually one of the biggest issues that are raised by drivers, both drivers and owner-operators, because companies are able to exert so much pressure on them so that they can save money by asking them to sometimes falsify logbooks, drive excessive hours, drive vehicles that are not maintained. They have nowhere to turn to actually report this. The entire responsibility is put on the driver to say no, and then at most they can file a reprisal claim. But as we've seen, it's very ineffective when they try to go through the Canada Labour Code enforcement. So they need a place to turn where they can actually report companies and they can be investigated. They should be able to report anonymously so they're not risking their jobs or having to every time they try to refuse something that's unsafe.
Some of the other measures and recommendations we've heard are about more data sharing between the provinces, a kind of registry of drivers who've been problematic. Are there other kind of joint initiatives that you think we should be considering as a committee to recommend for implementation?
I just wanted to add as well that what we're seeing from our organization and the folks that we work with, that it's not just, we're hearing that it's mostly like new immigrants that are kind of facing these issues. I just want to make clear that we're seeing this across the board with citizens, permanent residents, folks that do not have precarious status issues, that it's not an immigration status issue, it's an issue of enforcement and making sure that all drivers can access their rights.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to Ms. Corbett for one last word.
Yes, just in terms of what other things should be considered in that registry, I think it's important to include things like insurance, and if there's any proper way of tracking a company, like companies changing names, going from one province to another, that kind of thing really needs to be considered as well.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett, and thank you, Ms. Whelan. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole. 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Once again, Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I began with a question for the Caledon Group, and I've carried out a bit of research here once again, and I've seen that, I think you helped with this, by the way, there's a company called Sun Transportation Systems, which it seems operates an illegal truck yard in Caledon, which is now being investigated. And it seems that this same company is also a member of that infamous COTA group, which is lobbying for the Drivers Inc. model. And that we see very often photos of members of that lobby are often seen then in photos with a number of elected officials at all levels of government. And a number of them are contributors to and even donors to the Liberal Party. So do you fear seeing such organizations that seem to be infiltrating the political scene, that this will have a negative effect on law enforcement down the road?
Yes, it is a concern. I would say within our community, there are a lot of illegal truck yards. You know, Sun Transportations isn't necessarily the only one of concern. And what we do find is that there is a lot of lobbying power through these companies and, you know, giving money to political parties and influencing, you know, political decisions and policies that are made. It's very concerning for us residents, especially given the safety concerns that we have, like the public safety crisis.
Merci. Je vais profiter pour une dernière question. J'imagine j'aurai le temps pour
Thank you very much. I'll take advantage of this time I have for one last question for the Joy Smith Association. So the Canada Truck Driver Association came to us to tell us that fighting Drivers Inc. was basically a racist undertaking. I'd like to know, from your point of view at the Joy Smith Foundation, is that true, or is this a pretext to hide, a work model that might include labor trafficking and bonded labor?
So when it comes to forced labor, we certainly do see this across demographics. So there's not one specific, but what we do see is that when you have environments where somebody has control over somebody's immigration status and their hours and their work and all of these things, it does create an imbalance of power. So certainly, we do very consistently see in cases where the use of immigration pathways and misclassification add to their vulnerability and putting them in a position of control. And when these foreign nationals do come to our country with false promises very innocently, we've worked with many individuals that we've supported after their exit where, they've been in really horrific circumstances and they've been threatened.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off there just because I'm on a hard stop with resources for our committee today. And I do want to make sure that the two last members have their chance to ask questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all of our witnesses that have been here today. It's very powerful testimony. I'll just allow Ms. Campbell just to complete the last part of it because the Women Truck Drivers Association originally said that there was a number of people that either temporary foreign worker or student permits. Maybe she could just identify which program that seems to be where these bad actors are taking advantage of people.
So bad actors will use the fringes of these legitimate pathways as well as jurisdictions such as labor, such as tax, etc., to really stay in plain sight without really the full picture being seen. So by and large, the percentage of individuals we have on the forced labor side are individuals that have come to our country under some sort of promise. And in some cases, that's LMIAs. In other cases, it's other pathways. In some cases, it's the promise of a pathway that never really was established for them in the first place. And so that's primarily what we see.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Appreciate the work you do on behalf of Joy Smith Foundation. I'd like just to quickly ask CCRSA a little bit more. So the problem where you have such congestion, where it's aggravating folks, do you know where the source of those vehicles are? They registered in Ontario? Are they simply doing intra-provincial, or are they trucks from another province, which makes it even more difficult to get them to comply?
So the congestion in our areas, we're basically ground zero for Drivers Inc. Kyle Seaback has taken a tour of the area. He knows the area very well. And what boggles our mind is the Minister of Transportation lives just kilometers away. He knows what's going on. And we haven't been able to get through to him. A lot of the trucks are registered, most of the trucks are registered in Ontario. They have got Ontario license plate. The businesses, some of them are registered out in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Winnipeg. And that's the problem, too, right? So they've got those license plates. And what they're doing in these truck yards is beyond. We've contacted the Minister of Environment because we've know they're pouring motor oil and diesel fuel into the waterways. And unless we have proof, they won't come out. Just about a few months ago, there was a transport truck that had quite a bit of motor oil and just was dumping it into stormwater ponds. And our municipality had to clean that up. And that was only because he was caught in the middle of the night. He wasn't caught. Somebody just caught him on camera. And it is very, very dangerous what's going on. And we can't, it's almost impossible to find out who these people are, where they're registered, the shell companies that are there.
Yes, so the previous witness, in the previous hour, had talked about a national database to help coordinate enforcement efforts to know who these people are. They may simply close in one location, open up in another, have a new safety fitness certificate, which is the responsibility of the federal government, the conditions that would be in it. So there is, would having that suggestion by the previous testimony of a national database that could coordinate and identify who these actors are and to hold them accountable, do you believe that that would be one of the solutions necessary?
It is one of the solutions. It needs to be Canada-wide. They've got shell companies everywhere. And the database needs to be across because they go from Ontario to Quebec. They do something in Quebec and then they change to Saskatchewan and keep on driving.
I just want to thank you for the work you do, and I invite any members to see their website because I've seen some of the video footage of your hometown and some of the incidents that have happened, and it's very disturbing, and I am glad to see that your MP is working hard for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. And finally for today, we'll turn it over to Mr. Kellaway joining us online. Mr. Kellaway, the floor is yours. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it very much, and thanks for everyone attending today, both online and in person in Ottawa. I don't want to repeat a lot of the great questions that were asked today and all the great answers and important constructive answers, but I want to try to maybe dive a little deep into a couple of things. A consistent theme has been accountability and collaboration. So I'm wondering if we can start with the Caledon group there, and then work our way to Ms. Campbell and Ms. Anjula, if we could, get two recommendations in terms of whether it be federal or provincial, because let's be clear, this is a shared responsibility. But I kind of want to dive in the time I have left in terms of like key recommendations, like your top two that we need to look at right away. It sounds like that potentially a national registry is one, and greater federal oversight on things that may traditionally be provincial. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm looking to see if I can get a couple of recommendations first for those that are in attendance right now in Ottawa, and then move to Ms. Campbell and Ms. Anjula.
I can start. Yes. Please. So in terms of the registry, definitely that's one of the things that was in our opening statement. We definitely want to see some changes in terms of training. I think, I know that's provincial, but I think there needs to be a lot of federal oversight or some policy mandates for the provinces to actually step up and really follow through, especially within our province of Ontario. We have issues with a lot of the training and licensing being outsourced to third parties, and that really shouldn't be allowed. I do also want to mention, though, the criminal charges, that really needs to be considered when there's a truck driver who's committed something, because that's not happening now, and it's outrageous that someone dies and only gets a 55-day jail sentence. It's absolutely not acceptable.
Absolutely. Your colleagues next to you, do you have anything additional to that before we move on to Ms. Campbell?
No, definitely the collaboration. We're all hearing it. It's all coming from Ontario. Most of it's coming from Ontario. It's causing havoc across this country. So we really like to see some more push into the Ontario government, because right now they're not listening to anybody.
By push to the federal government, or to the
Ontario provincial governments, yes.
Yes. Okay. I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
And, okay. And your colleague next to you? I just want to make sure we capture everything.
As I said before, the statement that will never leave my mind is what these companies are telling their drivers to do. Doesn't matter if you kill them, because nothing's going to happen. A month or two in jail, it's the cost of doing business. So something needs to be done there with the criminal aspect of it. And of course, the T5018s, where the broker gives a T5018 to the carrier or the shipper, and the carrier shipper takes to the T4As to the drivers. And there's your cross audit. And that's what I would like to see.
Thank you very much. Ms. Campbell?
I think that within these different administrative processes, if there's a clear understanding of how the indicators are, so that those staff that are working with these types of files know that potentially this needs a criminal assessment. And then if from there you create those pathways for the referral, I think that also goes a long way towards some of the collaboration that exists, because there's a lot of great data and insight, but it's not always connecting. Even if we take a look at some of the motor carrier enforcement and those types of things where they do these traffic stops, we don't have law enforcement and OPP or RCMP present.
Thank you.
That would help.
Thank you. Thank you
very much, Mr. Kellaway, and to all of our witnesses joining us online and in person here today. I want to thank you sincerely for your testimony. It will help us enormously as we put together this report that will present Transport Canada, the Minister, and of course our provincial territorial counterparts. Colleagues, there has been some discussion behind the scenes, two housekeeping items that I need to bring up. The first is prolonging this study, as we thought it was important to do. It comes with a supplementary budget. Do I have unanimous consent to approve the supplementary budget to add on the additional meetings?
Yes.
Okay, so adopted. And secondly, members, on December 11th, the committee agreed to study Quebec and Canada's ports. And based on the text of the motion, it looks like we'll be doing that towards the end of February. The clerk has asked me to set a deadline for witnesses, names of witnesses to be put forward. Does next Wednesday, February 4th, sound good to members? Yes, sir.
Wednesday, Mr. Chair.
We can do that. Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. This meeting is adjourned.